y'all. We are here for the opening episode for the ReThink podcast, and we are about to have an amazing discussion. I'm Cameron Friend.
I'm Farris Watkins.
And the ReThink podcast is the place that we want to give you the tools of nonviolence to address the issues that are affecting you every single day in your local communities and in the global community at large. And Farris, I don't know about you, but I can't think of a better way to open up the ReThink podcast and to have a conversation with the one and only Dr. Bernice A. King.
Woo!
Yeah. What's going on, Dr. King? How are you?
Woo! I'm like, Arsenio, did y'all see Arsenio's comeback? I know that was before y'all's time.
Mm-hmm. I watched it the other day.
Comeback. Woo!
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's where I got it from.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the show. That was the show back in there. I hope he does well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he will.
So, Dr. King, you know, you have a litany of things that you've accomplished and done so far. We want to read off a couple of them real quick.
Okay, so we already know that you are the daughter of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You are the great-granddaughter of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. You are an author, a preacher, a mentor, a CEO.
And you left off my mama.
I'm not done. I'm not done. You have propelled your mother's legacy through being the CEO. And we're just so excited to have you here. And what people really don't know, I mean, they might not know, is that you are also a lawyer as well.
And you know what else they probably don't know? You're my cousin.
That's true. Blood cousin, okay?
Blood. Yeah, for real, y'all.
Yay.
Well, and again, to your point, you know, Dr. King, you have been the CEO of the King Center for, is it 9 years now?
Yeah, it'll be, yeah. I'm actually in my 10th year.
Okay, so you're in your 10th year now.
But you know how it goes. Wait till it ends and then you say 10th year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And then your mother, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, is the one that built the King Center in 1968, obviously the same year that your father was assassinated. And so you are carrying on that legacy. And Dr. King, something I've grown to know about you is your love and appreciation for your mother. Obviously, she was with you up until her passing in 2006. And really before we even begin to pay homage, you know, what is one thing maybe even about your mother that a lot of people may not know, or maybe one of the most things that are most important to you about who she was and what she's meant to you over the course of your life?
Yeah.
Wow, you know, my mother was a stabilizer for me. When I was in law school, in particular, I had a very difficult time. I actually went to Emory University School of Law and did a joint degree in theology school. So I got a Master of Divinity and a Doctorate of Law. But when I was in the law school part of it, I was struggling and ended up on probation a couple of times. And they were about to kick me out. And so it was tough because, you know, I had a moment where I had a knife in my hand and just wanted to end it all. And of course, my roommate at the time came down, saw me with the knife, said, "What are you doing?" Went and called my mom, you know, and in the meantime, the Holy Spirit started dealing with me. Up until that point, I was kind of in this space where I felt disconnected, didn't feel love. Doesn't mean it wasn't true, but I just didn't feel it. Because the course of my life, dealing with all of the deaths, the assassination of my father, the mysterious death of my uncle who was found in his swimming pool. I was 6 then, I was 5 when my father was assassinated, 11 when my grandmother was shot in church. It was just, we faced with a whole lot of stuff. And so to face this whole notion of, you know, you might not make it out of law school and you're gonna be stuck with theology school, so you're gonna always be under your daddy's shadow as this preacher, just really got to me. But my roommate, as I said, went upstairs. Next thing I know, Holy Spirit speaking to me and told me I had, you know, put the knife down. People were gonna miss me. I'm like, nobody's gonna miss me. He said, "You have a call." Reminded me of the call that I got on my life when I was 17 years of age. I was about 23, 24 at this time. And so my mom came over with Farris's grandma, you know, and you know, they started, you know, talking to me and you're just reassuring me of their love and support. You know, my mother always was there in very critical moments. She was extremely busy. As people may not know that once my father was assassinated, you said 2.5 months later, she founded the King Center, and she felt it was her responsibility to carry the next iteration of that legacy in terms of educating and training people about the philosophy and methodology of nonviolence they used to really change the South. And she felt it would be critical for future generations in social justice movements. So she was busy doing that, and also eventually working on galvanizing people for the federal holiday. But she found those moments to just be there. And I remember after that time period, when I had that knife and she came over, the next semester was my opportunity to not be kicked out. And so she decided every day we were going to get on that phone and we were going to have meditation and prayer. So there was this thing called the Daily Word. I think they still publish it. She would read that. She would talk to me, encourage me, and then pray with me during the exam time period. And of course, I came off of probation, thanks to the prayers of my mom. But the thing I like most about her is that she had I call it a resilience in the face of so many obstacles and challenges. There were so many people who tried to stop her. She just kept focused on her mission, her purpose, and she knew how to galvanize people. She was a great coalition builder. Right before the holiday, she pulled together, I think it was over 700 organizations to march on Washington for the 20th anniversary of March on Washington. At the top of the legislative agenda was the King holiday. Before they got there, Congress passed their part. And I guess because they saw this force of people coming. And then they went in August to do that anniversary. And then a few months later, the Senate passed it. And the president who didn't want to sign it, President Reagan, was sitting there signing it. And my mother was like,
yeah.
Just look, when you get a chance, just look at that picture, how she's looking at it. Yeah.
I remember that picture.
Like, yeah, how you like it now? You know, I tell people when my father was assassinated, he was one of the most hated men in America. There are polls out there that were done. But, you know, later on, now he's one of the most loved persons in the world, even though he's deceased. And a large part of that is because my mother was persistent in carrying forth that legacy. And Farris knows this, that she did it with the strong support of family. You know, I'm not sure she could have done it alone. She was a phenomenal person and she had a lot of drive and push, but it was the undergirding of the family and working side by side with my Aunt Christine, who was the treasurer and eventually the vice chair and treasurer of the King Center. And then my Uncle Isaac, Farris's grandfather, who really supported her on the King estate side at that time before it closed out and became a corporation later. And then my grandfather, you know, was a very strong voice when the people tried to tell us, stay home and raise your children. And at that time, you know, it was unheard of, a woman founding an institution like this, you know, and being at the forefront. And he basically told me, leave her alone and shut up. You know? Exactly. And then of course my uncle AD, before he passed, and my Aunt Naomi and just the rest of the family. And so I'm just so grateful for that that's kind of support. But I want to share this, and I'm done. The most striking moment for me personally with my mother was when I was driving down 166 here in Atlanta. And it kind of connects 285 and 75, 85. Those on the SWATs know what I'm talking about. And I was upset about something. I mean, I was angry. I say I was pissed off. And I was talking about a decision I was gonna make because of my anger. And my mother stopped me dead in my tracks and said, baby, never make a decision in your anger. Yeah. That has stuck with me and has been so helpful because we got emotions. We're gonna feel some stuff because of what's happening in life. But we gotta gather ourselves and work through the emotions before we make that final decision. Because what we don't want to do is make a decision that we'll later regret. Or could cause some irreparable harm.
Right.
So I thank God for her wisdom. She was a very wise woman.
Yeah. So in your childhood, you know, like we know, well, I don't want to say we, I was able to experience my Aunt Coretta. She was, oh my gosh, she was just a powerful woman, but she was so gentle, so classy. She had such a loving and nurturing spirit. What was it like in your childhood growing up with all of these prominent, powerful people in the household? What was that like?
You know, what's crazy? I never saw it like that as a child. You know, this was just my mama. You know, this was my granddaddy. It wasn't until I went to school at Galloway, which is in Buckhead here in Atlanta. I went there in elementary school, and then I went to Frederick Douglass High, and that's where I graduated from. But at Galloway, these white kids would say, "You're Martin Luther King's daughter," and I'm like,
"Okay."
Okay, what does that mean? Yeah, because I didn't fully understand everything my parents were doing at the time. And it was later on as my mother in the household would always invoke his words, you know, and she would always tell us about the scripture that, you know, was really central to his work, which was he that would be greatest among you shall be the servant of you all. She used to talk about cutting off the chain of violence, but it was a busy household. I mean, we had a lot of activity. We did have to have someone who cooked for us and clean and all that because my mother was so busy. We got a chance every now and then to taste her food. She did a mean pot roast. You know, it just literally melted in your mouth. But yeah, I mean, as I got older and began to understand more, I said, wow, you know, I'm in the midst of some greatness because so many people came through our household through the years. And even after, you know, I left, I remember Oprah and Stedman coming to the house. And I had this conversation with Stedman that I was, you know, it really troubled me. Stedman, you know, I was telling him about law school and theology school at the same time. He said, wow, I just imagine, you know, when you go into the class, I mean, when other people go in the classroom, they're like here. And then, you know, they can go here. But when you go in, it's kind of like you're here and there's not anywhere to go but down. And I was like, So I've been living with this whole notion, anywhere but down.
Right. Wow.
That was a pretty deep comment. I was like, that ain't fair. You know? I shouldn't start right here. I need to start where everybody else starts. So I have a chance to accelerate and grow.
Wow, I can unpack that.
I think that's fascinating though, especially for, you know, the Gen Zers and for millennials that are listening to this. I mean, even hearing your story of how you had to deal with suffering, how you had to deal with your own trauma. But I think too, even like not having to live, trying to live, not live for expectations of other people or even the environments around you, because you've had an immense amount of pressure put on you since you were a kid. Again, not necessarily from your family, but maybe expectations of what other people were thinking, but you have managed to make your own lane in the world.
And you know what helped that? My mother used to tell me and my siblings, I have, as you all know, I have 3 other siblings, a sister who suddenly passed in 2007, 16 months after my mom. And then my brother Martin III, who's the second born, my sister's the firstborn, and then Dexter Scott King. But she used to tell us, look, you don't have to be your father, you don't have to be me. All you have to do is to be your best self. And so that was her expectation of us. And it relieved me. And in those times when I had that kind of pressure, and even now, you know, because I'm going to tell you, there have been moments when it's like, God, this ain't fair. You know, most kids want to most kids want to surpass their parents.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you surpass someone who's still living for so many people?
Wow.
You know, they're still like guides and mentors and leaders for so many people across the world. So I had to settle in recently. It's been since the pandemic, and say, look, you know, when people ask you about your legacy, you don't have to freak out anymore about the fact that you got these, you know, this looming, you know, legacy of your parents. All you got to do is to kind of sync up with that, because unlike most people who are seeking to create a legacy, you were born into legacy. That even started before my father. My great-grandfather was a strong activist. My grandfather, and even on my mother's side, very strong community-involved people. And so I don't feel that pressure anymore to try to surpass, do better than what I feel is that I have this niche that I have to accomplish in the legacy to add my brick to it. And thank God that I don't have to be the one to lay the foundation for a whole new legacy.
That's amazing.
That's powerful, Dr. King. And I honestly think that obviously leads into our next question. And, you know, this is, I remember I heard you talk about this before, and I hadn't even had the thought prior to hearing it. But for you, when your father is a nonviolent leader, you know, he's a pastor, he is a communicator, he's a thinker, he's an innovator, he's a builder. He is trying to build the beloved community and trying to do right by all of humanity. But he was assassinated, and he was hated and vilified, in particular by many white people, especially around America and around the US. And then obviously he is, you know, killed by a white man. And so you shared publicly one time that it took a long time for you to be able to handle that, and also to deal with the fact that it was white people who did this and had such a maybe a hate for your father. Obviously not everyone, but a majority of the society at the time. What was that like for you, and how are you even able to get to the place where for you were able to forgive white people as a whole for what happened?
Yeah, a lot of it is interpretation. You know, when things happen to us, you know, we go into our own minds and we draw these different conclusions, some which may be true and some that are not. And we end up in different places, some anger, some resentment, some jealousy, some hatred. Eventually it gets into rage, and then you want to feel like you want to hurt somebody. And I got to those stages. I was very angry, an angry young person, really. I covered it pretty well, but it eventually caught up with me because I did very violent things. It was my tongue. And I remember hitting somebody over the head with a bottle once. I mean, it was just that bad. And I knew then that what I was feeling emotionally was very potentially self-destructive.
Wow.
And that's what I want to say about emotions. All of that I was feeling regarding my father's assassination, then my uncle, you know, who was a very good swimmer, an avid swimmer, didn't have water in his lungs, but mysteriously found in his pool dead. Grandmother being shot in church on the same Sunday that I had been out for 2 weeks, and I was looking forward to coming back after having my tonsils out. And then just looking at the way things were moving along in society, it felt like we weren't making a whole lot of progress. And I was angry over and over again about the way my father was taken out of here and how it kind of repositioned my family, because my mother was more physically present before he was assassinated. Now she was even kind of moved out some. So I had to deal with these issues of abandonment and everything. And I ended up in this place, as you said, where I started hating white people, and especially white men. And it was, I didn't share it with anybody. I just carried it around. I remember being at a movie once, I think it was called Mississippi Burning. And I came out of that movie just pissed off. You know, if I had grown up in a family that had weapons, I probably would have been in trouble because I was that angry. And my boyfriend at the time, he told me later, I couldn't control you. You were just out of control.
Wow.
And I was. I mean, because I had already been feeling all of this stuff inside, close to rage. And then you go to this movie about what happens to the Black people, the way Black people have been treated and killed by whites. And not all whites, but, someone who's a white person. So over time, as I was carrying this, I ended up accepting my call to the ministry, obviously. Right. I had already been traveling because I started speaking at age 17, but I was going to different churches, and I ended up being interviewed by James Robeson, who's an evangelical minister to this day, still around. I think he has a show on TBN. And he was interviewing me about my father, the loss, of my father, or I say the assassination, and its impact on me. And in the middle of the show, he just felt the need to ask me, can I hug you? Now, internally, I was like, hell no.
More COVID,
white
man, okay?
Yeah. No. But my mother taught me better. So I received the hug. Yeah. And I don't know, something happened in that moment. It was the most genuine hug, one of the most that I had ever received. Wow. And it just started lifting things out of me. And from the time when I did the bottle to that moment, to then opening my eyes to things that white men started doing very nicely toward me, I started shifting and realizing that what I was feeling, number one, was hurting me more than whatever I thought I was, whoever I thought I was angry at. They didn't even know I was angry or feeling that way, So these kind of emotions, people can hold you hostage.
Wow.
Or they can take up residence in your mind, and in your heart. People can hold you hostage with these emotions, and they're going on with their life. And sometimes it's people that don't even know you. You just, you know what I'm saying? And may not even know that you're feeling the way you're feeling. And yet you're walking around and they're living all freely and happily and all that kind of stuff. And you're bogged down in all these negative emotions. So I had to get relief from that. It was affecting me physically in my stomach. And so I just started going on that journey and going back to what I said when I first really gave my life to Christ. After that knife incident, that's when I really asked Christ into my heart and into my life, because I think he literally saved me that day.
Wow.
And I went from that day, I said, I want to be more like Christ. And because I said that at the time, and I was serious, it was like God, and he does this to this day, he will always bring Jesus to me. The life of Jesus, the examples of Jesus, and, just bringing before me Christ and, forgiving what he said about forgiveness, 70 times 7, and Christ on that cross, that's really what got me. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I had to come to a place where I really understood, even though I didn't know these were my father's words, but I really understood what my father meant when he said there's nothing in all the world more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. People may do stuff and we think, yes, they know physically what they're doing, but they don't know the full ramifications, of their actions holistically in the big scheme of things. And so, I recognize I can no longer let people hold me hostage. So when things happen, I process the feelings, because I don't think you should deny that. So many people try to just push it away. I process through those feelings, and I tell people what I do is I visit them for a set period of time. I don't set up residence. I'm not trying to live there. And then, I move to the other space of letting go and forgiving, because I've had to learn how to forgive me. How dare I not forgive other people? When I understood, things about me that I don't even like, but I had to learn to love me. So now I can genuinely say that I love people unconditionally. And there's probably nothing anybody can do to me that would get me to the place where I would be unforgiven. I can't carry that burden anymore. It's like Dad even said with hate, too great a burden to bear.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes, hate is too great a burden to bear.
And so is unforgiveness.
Yeah, exactly. But that's amazing how it ties into what Uncle Retta told you about, don't act when you're upset, all of that just kind of comes full circle. But let's get into chaos and community. We have looked at our society and we can see racial unrest, voter suppression, a lot of protests going on. I mean, it is like a modern day apocalypse without, the fires and all of that good stuff. But it's really a tumultuous...
And there are fires though. There are fires out in the West right now.
There are. But when we look at our society, we're kind of looking for like, how do we fix it? Where do we go from here? How do you feel about the time that we're in now, and how will nonviolence help us to achieve where we want to be?
I think nonviolence is a great organizing tool and a tool to help with strategy. I think what seems to be missing today with all of these issues that we're faced with is the lack of a strategy and a plan of action. Wow, everybody, has their issue or issues that trigger in them the need to speak up, to do something about it. But we have to move beyond just creating an awareness around the issue, which oftentimes people today who use protest, they use it to bring to the attention of the masses this ugly evil. And Daddy and them did the same thing, but they tied it to a larger strategy. So what we call in nonviolence direct action actually is a fifth step in the process, which is preceded by information gathering, which is one of the most fundamental things. Even when you're trying to do direct action, you want to be able to know what is the most effective direct action to get to the goal. And also information gathering helps you to understand what is the ultimate goal that you're trying to get to. So how do I frame the issue so that people can also understand what's going on from all sides? Because a lot of times when we do information gathering, it's to support our position, but you also want people to understand the other position too, because in order to win people over, and to kind of break up all the conflict, you have to understand the other person's side. Even a good lawyer, if you're putting it in those terms, a good litigator is going to understand the other person's side and things the points that they're going to argue, so they can effectively challenge those. So in my mind, nonviolence is the most potent way for us to overcome the injustices that we're faced with, and to put in place the right kind of legislation and also follow up from that legislation, because we spend a lot of time pushing people towards voting, which we know right now is being threatened in our society. And it's one of the most fundamental things in our democracy. And without it, we don't have a democracy. No. And so we have to fight for the right to vote. And we should continue to encourage people to vote. But we have to encourage people to become engaged citizens, because voting is one thing. You also got to make sure that while you put people in office, that they are focused on passing policy and legislation that's important to creating a just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world. And that's important. And we talk about that all the time. We got to get legislation. We got to get the George Floyd Policing Act. We got to get the, John Lewis Voter Advancement Act. We got to get the, For the People Act. Or we got to get, whatever around livable wages or gun control. And that's good. But, that's another phase that is still not quite enough. And what nonviolence does is it gives you a holistic approach. While you encourage people to vote and what that's about, you push people to give pressure to their legislators for policy and laws. But at the end of the day, you also got to superintend those laws, because you want them to accomplish what they were set out to do in the first place. Otherwise, it's just sitting on the book. And there's so many laws that never were implemented. They never carried out their purpose. Brown versus Board of Education, when schools were supposed to be fully desegregated, never happened.
Yeah.
Because everybody was, they were happy about, the law.
Yeah.
But there was no plan. Okay, how do we make sure they carry this out?
Yeah.
So that's where nonviolence gives you the framework of how do we put together a strategy to make sure that happens. And then it also helps us to learn how to engage each other around our differences.
Yeah.
We're going to have different perspectives, different ideas as to how to get to certain places. What nonviolence helps us with is how do we create a win-win pathway?
Yeah.
Because there's no way in this world that we're going to make it if it's always about, I win, you lose, you win, I lose. We've got to now look at, okay, we live in a global world. We're interconnected because of technology now. We depend on each other. I mean, during the pandemic and even now, I mean, I've been doing some work around my house, and there are a lot of the materials that are on back order because we have to get them from other countries.
Yep.
Right.
And because of the pandemic, things have been complicated. So when you understand that interrelatedness and interconnectedness, you have to realize, how do I learn to coexist with people? Because I can't, I know we're in this whole thing about cancel culture and, push people away, but in a beloved community, you can't cancel people. So we have to learn to resolve conflicts peacefully and without bitterness in the end. And that's what nonviolence helps us, not to have bitterness or create even bitterness with the person who may have opposed us or what that we call an adversary.
Yeah.
What's fascinating is, before I got introduced to the King Center, even just the Kingian nonviolence and the strategies behind it, even I was unaware of how inclusive nonviolence was as a philosophy, as a way of life.
Yeah.
And so, but once you get immersed into it, and so definitely for our listeners, Gen Z, millennial, make sure you're researching the principles and steps of nonviolence to find out what that means, because again, it's an active thing that you participate in. It's not this passive mentality of just letting things happen, but it's a strategy, it's organizing it, it's implementing.
It's not just used, for big situations, right? It can be used for everyday life.
Like Dr. King, you brought up you trying to get stuff worked on for your house. Now I know this is a side note. I've been trying to get an Xbox for the last year, and they got it on back order right now because of the pandemic. They got them on hold and all this other stuff. I've been suffering. I had to use nonviolence in that situation because I've been waiting on the Xbox.
Yes.
It don't make no sense. Anyway, that's a side note, Dr. King. You ain't even got to interject in that. So with the King Center, can you tell us, this is obviously it's been framed as the fifth child of your mother, but what is the mission and the vision of the King Center, and why is the King Center so important to you in particular?
Well, the vision is about the beloved community where injustice ceases and love prevails. I mean, that's the vision. That's where we're trying to get to. And as a part of that, we see our role and function is in empowering people to create a just, humane, equitable, and peaceful world by utilizing the philosophy and methodology of nonviolence as taught by Dr. King, which we call Nonviolence 365. And the reason why we call it today, it's still Kingian nonviolence, but it's been rebranded so that people can think about it the way Farris just talked about. It's not just a social justice tactic. It's something that you can utilize on a day-to-day basis, 365 days a year. It's a way of life. And so, our work is really about helping to empower people with these teachings in different arenas. We're not just seeing activists, we're seeing psychologists, law enforcement, people in the corporate community. We're getting requests out of corporate communities now because there's workplace conflict. People in the workplace, it's not all overt conflict, it's covert, some of the microaggression that occurs in the workplace. People want to know, how do we effectively deal with that in our working environment? And nonviolence gives us a framework for addressing that. So we do multiple kinds of trainings. We're constantly developing new trainings, even as we speak. And at some point, we're going to have an online self-guided version. I'm looking forward to that. And we do these beloved community talks. And you know, we started out with some real radical stuff when we started doing these beloved community talks. We had a gentleman who literally disrupted the Klan in Maryland, a Black gentleman. You know, he was bold and brave because he understood that, you know, if anything's going to change, I got to come out of my silo and in my echo chamber, and I got to step into that world where those people who hate me are, and try to figure out what is this about. And he did just that. You know, he said, how can you hate me and you don't know me? So he started knowing them, and many of them literally started denouncing the Klan, turned over their robe to him. And some of them are anti-racist activists. And he did so much work that in Maryland, it was very difficult to find a formalized Klan organization because he had penetrated so much. So that's a challenge to this generation. Don't just dismiss people and push them to the side. You know, engage in these courageous conversations, cross these lines. And that's what the Beloved Community Talks is really about, is to kind of elevate conversations that we typically don't like to have and explore issues that may be a little bit more challenging to explore, go deeper into some of these issues. And then, of course, you know, you work as I'm a youth and millennial coordinator, Cameron, and we have our Camp Now Leadership Academy, which we are about to transition to something much broader that we hope is going to really become expansive in our world, into our beloved community leadership academy, because we really want to raise a new generation who thinks about beloved community on a day-to-day basis. You know, whatever actions, whatever field of endeavor they go in, they're going as an agent of creating and establishing the beloved community. It doesn't matter what the world is: entertainment, media, medicine, you know, science, technology, you know, education, sports, whatever it is, that you know, politics, you know. So, you know, we've got a lot going on, and you know, I invite people to go to kingcenter.org. And check us out, because more and more things will be revealed. I'm excited about some of the things that are on the horizon that I'm not going to talk about right now.
We're excited too. We are really excited as well. I know Uncoretta, one thing that she really understood was knowing that the younger generations and generations after the younger generations needed to understand and really grasp this concept that you just spoke of. And I was a part of that as well. Most people remember me as a little girl falling asleep, or sucking my thumb or whatever during the commemorative service. And Uncoretta saw, you know, that younger people needed to be involved in that service as well. And that's when she asked for me to be a part of it as well. And for so many years, I was graced to be on that stage and represent for my generation and generations after me as well. But how do you think that this podcast, the ReThink podcast, we're launching, this is our first episode. How do you think that this podcast would, I guess, move this mission that she envisioned forward?
Yeah, I think it's a good tool to connect on the level that, you know, your generation understands, you know, to have a voice with your being birthed in all of this, Farris, and your involvement intimately with the King Center and year after year. I think it's critical for this generation to be able to experience that and understand that from somebody who grew up in it. And then with Cameron's background, you know, working with young people, and then his background that he has in ministry, and his love of people, because both of you love people. I mean, yeah. I mean, you can't. I mean, I'm serious. You can't really reach people if you don't love them. And you all have this extraordinary heart toward people, and I think you have a way of connecting. So I'm excited that this is an opportunity for young people to hear from other young people about these possibilities, because we live in a time now where people think nonviolence is lame because they think it's weak.
Yeah.
I don't see the nonviolence. I mean, John Lewis was not weak. Daddy was not weak. Mama was not weak. Amelia Boynton, that the woman who was on the bridge with them, and they think if you get beat, you're weak. These people knew. They knew how to try to protect themselves. I watched C.T. Vivian confront Sheriff Jim Clark. I challenge people to go back and look at this over and over again. That strength of love and that courage to confront Clark, and even once you got beat down, because they thought violence would intimidate us and shut us down. And we said, oh no, and maybe thought that we would just strike back. Because they're used to that. They know how to beat your back if you try to stand up to them that way. But it was like it throws the mind off. It confuses people because it shows them that they are very animalistic in their behavior, and you look crazy. So CT gets back up. You know what I'm saying? With the blood coming down, and still just courageously saying, why would you beat me? We're just trying to register the vote. I mean, woo, that's some powerful stuff. And then when you look at those young people who go into the park during 1963, and look at their face. I mean, they're standing with so much pride, and forcefulness. Like, we're on a mission right here. We're not letting anybody stop us, turn us back. We are determined to be able to break through so that we can enjoy the same privileges that the white citizens enjoy. And because of that, that's why we have these things today. Yeah, we got some challenges. But back then, you couldn't go to Lennox, you couldn't go to Phipps, you couldn't go to a movie and sit at the front. In fact, you couldn't even go in the same entrance. There was a whole nother entrance. You couldn't go to any restaurant you wanted to go to. You had to go to the back of the door. There's a lot of progress that has been made. But yes, we're at the most difficult part. And Daddy talked about it. He didn't back down from it. He said genuine equality. Where kind of there's like this equal respect and exchange in the marketplace. That's going to be much more costlier, and much more difficult, because backlash and resistance is going to always be present. And that's what we've seen. Think about the voting laws. Think about critical race theory conversations. Think about our governor, signing legislation to say that municipalities, local police municipalities cannot reduce their budgets by more than 5%. That was a response to defund the police. All of this is backlash and resistance. So what you all can do is help break through some of that noise, and kind of bring it to them in a way that they can understand the power of nonviolence to change this stuff and transform this stuff.
Well, Dr. King, this is only going to be the first time that you're going to be on this podcast. We already have you scheduled for another conversation at a later date, but this has been an amazing conversation. I just want to say thank you. Obviously, we stand on not only Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s shoulders, not only Mrs. Greta Cox King's shoulder, but also your shoulders as well. You have been a tremendous leader. I've said this to you before, but just to say it publicly, you've done a wonderful job, especially the last several years, and the way your voice has been so necessary, so organic, and the tone and the level of empathy that you have shared for people, but also the fact that you are so intelligent in communicating what needs to be said. That's such a needed form of leadership, and especially in the social media space, especially on your Twitter. So I just want to say thank you for empowering us to be able to do this, because this is going to be an exceptional platform, but it wouldn't be possible without your support. So thank you for that, Dr. King.
Yeah, you have been such
a
part, and even my growth. I mean, you've watched me since I was born. But just seeing how you have stepped into this role and just, I mean, taking the roof off of it. I always say that this year, 2021, is the year of the Black woman. And just to be able to look at you and know that this strength and this power came from a lineage that I can call my own, and know it's not just an inspiration to me, but it's an inspiration to other Black girls and other women in our society who want to evoke change in the community and in our world. So once again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you. Proud of you and looking forward to how this ReThink gonna causes people to rethink. Because the names, this ain't just a name, y'all.
Yeah.
the purpose of the pause is to get you to, it's kind of like what my mama was saying, Bernice, rethink what you about to do.
Right,
right. Rethink what you about to say, y'all. Rethink what you about to do. And I look at this, look at it again.
Yeah.
That's so important too, because I was listening to something the other day where it was talking about how when you really get to a sense of peace, whatever situation you were going through, maybe you were angry in that moment, or maybe you had a mixture of emotions during that moment, and you really couldn't see how it was going to be solved because all of that anger, all of those emotions were clouding your mind. But when you really get to a sense of peace, you're able to rethink all types of situations and see different solutions that end up being the better outcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, look, y'all, that's going to end it for the first episode, you all. But look, hey, it ain't going to stop here. We got another episode coming out next week. So be ready, subscribe, hit the subscribe button, follow us on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, follow us on iTunes and Spotify, share it. Because we're going to be here. We're going to have great conversations, you all. Hey, that's it for the first episode.
Peace.